Frodo exclaimed. "Ah, who would?" said Sam. "Elves are wonderful folk. It looks a bit thin, but it's tough, and soft as milk to the hand. Packs close too, and as light as light. Wonderful folk, to be sure." 30 elves, said Frodo, considering. "I believe it would be enough. If the storm passes before nightfall, I'm going to try it." "The rain's nearly given over already," said Sam. "But don't you go doing anything risky in the dim again, Mr. Frodo. And I haven't got over that shriek on the wind yet, if you have. Like a black rider it sounded, but one up in the air, if they can fly. I'm thinking we'd best lay up in this crack till night's over." "And I'm thinking that I won't spend a moment longer than I need, stuck up on this edge with the eyes of the dark country looking over the marshes," said Frodo. With that he stood up and went down to the bottom of the gully again. He looked out. Clear sky was growing in the east once more. The skirts of the storm were lifting, ragged and wet, and the main battle had passed to spread its great wings over the Emyn Muil, upon which the dark thought of Sauron brooded for a while. Thence it turned, smiting the vale of Anduin with hail and lightning, and casting a shadow upon Minas Tirith with threat of war. Then, lowering in the mountains, and gathering its great spires, it rolled on slowly over Gondor and the skirts of Rohan, until far away the riders on the plain saw its black towers moving behind the sun as they rode into the west. But here, over the desert and the reeking marshes, the deep blue sky of evening opened once more, and a few pallid stars appeared, like small white holes in the canopy above the crescent moon. "It's good to be able to see again," said Frodo, breathing deep. "Do you know, I thought for a bit that I'd lost my sight, from the lightning or something else worse. I could see nothing at all, until the grey rope came down. It seems to shimmer somehow." "It does look sort of silver in the dark," said Sam. "Never noticed it before, though I can't remember as I've ever had it out since I first stowed it. But if you're so set on climbing, Mr. Frodo, how are you going to use it?" 30 ells, or say about 18 fathom, that's no more than your guess at the height of the cliff." Frodo thought for a while. "Make it fast to that stump, Sam," he said. "Then I think you shall have your wish this time and go first. I'll lower it, and you need do no more than use your feet and hands to fend yourself off the rock. Though, if you put your weight on some of the ledges and give me a rest, it'll help. When you're down, I'll follow. I feel quite myself again now." "Very well," said Sam heavily. "If it must be, let's get it over." He took up the rope and made it fast over the stump nearest to the brink. Then the other end he tied about his own waist. Reluctantly he turned and prepared to go over the edge a second time. It did not, however, turn out half as bad as he had expected. The rope seemed to give him confidence, though he shut his eyes more than once when he looked down between his feet. There was one awkward spot, where there was no ledge and the wall was sheer and even undercut for a short space. There he slipped and swung out on the silver line. But Frodo lowered him slowly and steadily, and it was over at last. His chief fear had been that the rope length would give out while he was still high up. But there was still a good bite in Frodo's hands when Sam came to the bottom and called up, "I'm down!" His voice came up clearly from below, but Frodo couldn't see him. His grey elven cloak had melted into the twilight. Frodo took rather more time to follow him. He had the rope about his waist, and it was fast above, and he'd shortened it so that it would pull him up before he reached the ground. Still, he didn't want to risk a fall, and he hadn't quite Sam's faith in this slender grey line. He found two places, all the same, where he had to trust wholly to it. Small surfaces where there was no hold even for his strong hobbit fingers, and the ledges were far apart. But at last he too was down. "Well," he cried, "we've done it. We've escaped from the Emyn Muil. And now what next, I wonder? Maybe we shall soon be sighing for good hard rock underfoot again." But Sam didn't answer. He was staring back up the cliff. "Ninny hammers," he said. "Noodles, my beautiful rope. There it is tied to a stump, and we're at the bottom. Just as nice a little stair for that slinking golem as we could leave. Better put up a signpost to say which way we've gone. I thought it seemed a bit too easy. If you can think of any way we could have both used the rope and yet brought it down with us, then you can pass on to me Ninny Hammer or any other name your gaffer gave you," said Frodo. "Climb up and untie it and let yourself down if you want to." Sam scratched his head. "No, I can't think how, begging your pardon," he said. "But I don't like leaving it, and that's the fact." He stroked the rope's end and took it gently. "It goes hard parting with anything I brought out of the elf country. Made by Galadriel herself, too, maybe." "Galadriel," he murmured, nodding his head mournfully. He looked up and gave one last pull to the rope, as if in farewell. To the complete surprise of both the hobbits, it came loose. Sam fell over, and the long grey coils slithered silently down on top of him. Frodo laughed. "Who tied the rope?" he said. "A good thing it held as long as it did. To think that I trusted all my weight to your knot." Sam didn't laugh. "I may not be much good at climbing, Mr. Frodo," he said in injured tones, "but I do know something about rope and about knots. It's in the family, as you might say. Why, my granddad, and my Uncle Andy after him that was the gaffer's eldest brother, he had a rope walk over by Tyfield many a year, and I put as fast a hitch over the stump as anyone could have done in the Shire or out of it." "Then the rope must have broken." "Frayed on the rock edge, I expect," said Frodo. "I bet it didn't," said Sam in an even more injured voice. He stooped and examined the ends. "Nor it hasn't neither, not a strand." "Then I'm afraid it must have been the knot," said Frodo. Sam shook his head and didn't answer. He was passing the rope through his fingers thoughtfully. "Have it your own way, Mr. Frodo," he said at last. "But I think the rope came off itself when I called." He coiled it up and stowed it lovingly in his pack. "It certainly came," said Frodo, "and that's the chief thing. But now we've got to think of our next move. Night will be on us soon. How beautiful the stars are, and the moon." "They do cheer the heart, don't they?" said Sam, looking up. "Elvish they are, somehow. And the moon's growing. We haven't seen him for a night or two in this cloudy weather. He's beginning to give quite a light." "Yes," said Frodo, "but he won't be full for some days. I don't think we'll try the marshes by the light of half a moon." Under the first shadows of night, they started out on the next stage of their journey. After a while, Sam turned and looked back at the way they'd come. The mouth of the gully was a black notch in the dim cliff. "I'm glad we've got the rope," he said. "We've set a little puzzle for that footpad, anyhow. He can try his nasty, flappy feet on those ledges." They picked their steps away from the skirts of the cliff, among a wilderness of boulders and rough stones, wet and slippery with a heavy rain. The ground still fell away sharply. They'd not gone very far when they came upon a great fissure that yawned suddenly black before their feet. It was not wide, but it was too wide to jump across in the dim light. They thought they could hear water gurgling in its depths. It curved away on their left northward, back towards the hills, and so barred their road in that direction, at any rate while darkness lasted. "We'd better try a way back southwards along the line of the cliff, I think," said Sam. "We might find some nook there, or even a cave or something." "I suppose so," said Frodo. "I'm tired, and I don't think I can scramble among stones much longer tonight, though I grudge the delay. I wish there was a clear path in front of us. Then I'd go on till my legs gave way." They didn't find the going any easier at the broken feet of the Emyn Muil. Nor did Sam find any nook or hollow to shelter in. Only bare, stony slopes frowned over by the cliff, which now rose again, higher and more sheer as they went back. In the end, worn out, they just cast themselves on the ground under the lee of a boulder lying not far from the foot of the precipice. There for some time they sat huddled mournfully together in the cold, stony night, while sleep crept upon them in spite of all they could do to hold it off. The moon now rode high and clear. Its thin white light lit up the faces of the rocks and drenched the cold, frowning walls of the cliff, turning all the wide, looming darkness into a chill, pale grey scored with black shadows. "Well," said Frodo, standing up and drawing his cloak more closely round him, "you sleep for a bit, Sam, and take my blanket. I'll walk up and down on sentry for a while." Suddenly he stiffened, and stooping, he gripped Sam by the arm. "What's that?" he whispered. "Look over there on the cliff." Sam looked and breathed in sharply through his teeth. "Shh," he said. "That's what it is. It's that Gollum. Snakes and adders. And to think that I thought that we'd puzzle him with our bit of a climb. Look at him, like a nasty crawling spider on a wall." Down the face of a precipice, sheer and almost smooth it seemed in the pale moonlight, a small black shape was moving, with its thin limbs splayed out. Maybe its soft, clinging hands and toes were finding crevices and holes that no hobbit could ever have seen or used, but it looked as if it were just creeping down on sticky paths, like some large, prowling thing of insect kind. And it was coming down head first, as if it was smelling its way. Now and again it lifted its head slowly, turning it right back on its long, skinny neck, and the hobbits caught a glimpse of two small, pale, gleaming lights, its eyes that blinked at the moon for a moment, and then were quickly lidded again. "Do you think he can see us?" said Sam. "I don't know," said Frodo quietly, "but I think not. It's hard even for friendly eyes to see those elven cloaks. I cannot see you in the shadow, even at a few paces, and I've heard that he doesn't like sun or moon." "Then why is he coming down just here?" asked Sam. "Quietly, Sam," said Frodo. "He can smell us, perhaps, and he can hear as keen as elves, I believe. I think he has heard something now, our voices probably. We did a lot of shouting away back there, and we were talking far too loudly until a minute ago." "Well, I'm sick of him," said Sam. "He's come once too often for me, and I'm going to have a word with him if I can. I don't suppose we could give him the slip now, anyway." Drawing his grey hood well over his face, Sam crept stealthily towards the cliff. "Careful," whispered Frodo, coming behind. "Don't alarm him. He's much more dangerous than he looks." The black, crawling shape was now 3/4 of the way down, and perhaps 50 feet or less above the cliff's foot. Crouching stone still in the shadow of a large boulder, the hobbits watched him. He seemed to have come to a difficult passage, or to be troubled about something. They could hear him snuffling, and now and again there was a harsh hiss of breath that sounded like a curse. He lifted his head, and they thought they heard him spit. Then he moved on again. Now they could hear his voice creaking and whistling. "Ah, cautious, my precious. More haste, less speed. We mustn't risk our neck, must we, precious? No, precious." He lifted his head again, blinked at the moon, and quickly shut his eyes. "We hate it," he hissed. "Nasty, shivery light it is. It spies on us, precious. It hurts our eyes." He was getting lower now, and the hisses became sharper and clearer. "Where is it? Where is it, my precious, my precious? It's ours, it is, and we want it. The thieves, the filthy little thieves. Where are they with my precious? Curse them. We hate them." "It doesn't sound as if he knew we were here, does it?" whispered Sam. "And what is precious? Does he mean the—" "Shh," breathed Frodo. "He's getting near now, near enough to hear a whisper." Indeed, Gollum had suddenly paused again, and his large head on its scrawny neck was lolling from side to side as if he was listening. His pale eyes were half unlidded. Sam restrained himself, though his fingers were twitching. His eyes, filled with anger and disgust, were fixed on the wretched creature as he now began to move again, still whispering and hissing to himself. At last he was no more than a dozen feet from the ground, right above their heads. From that point there was a sheer drop, for the cliff was slightly undercut, and even Gollum could not find a hold of any kind. He seemed to be trying to twist round so as to go legs first, when suddenly, with a shrill, whistling shriek, he fell. As he did so, he curled his legs and arms up round him, like a spider whose descending thread is snapped. Sam was out of his hiding in a flash, and crossed the space between him and the cliff foot in a couple of leaps. Before Gollum could get up, he was on top of him. But he found Gollum more than he bargained for, even taken like that, suddenly, off his guard after a fall. Before Sam could get a hold, long legs and arms were wound round him, pinning his arms, and a clinging grip, soft but horribly strong, was squeezing him like slowly tightening cords. Clammy fingers were feeling for his throat. Then sharp teeth bit into his shoulder. All he could do was to butt his hard head sideways into the creature's face. Gollum hissed and spat, but he didn't let go. Things would have gone ill with Sam if he'd been alone. But Frodo sprang up and drew Sting from its sheath. With his left hand he drew back Gollum's head by his thin, lank hair, stretching his long neck and forcing his pale, venomous eyes to stare up at the sky. "Let go, Gollum," he said. "This is Sting. You've seen it before once upon a time. Let go, or you'll feel it this time. I'll cut your throat." Gollum collapsed and went as loose as wet spring. Sam got a little finger in his shoulder. His eyes smoldered with anger. He could not avenge himself. His miserable enemy lay groveling on the stone, whimpering. "Don't hurt us. Don't let them hurt us, precious. They won't hurt us, will they? Nice little hobbitses. We didn't mean them no harm, but they jumps on us like cats on poor mices. They did it, precious. And we're so lonely. We'll be nice to them, very nice, if they'll be nice to us, won't we? Yes, yes." "Well, what's to be done with it?" said Sam. "Tie it up, so as it can't come sneaking after us no more, I say." "But that would kill us," whimpered Gollum. "Cruel little hobbits, tie us up in the cold, hard lands and leave us." Sobs welled up in his groveling throat. "No," said Frodo. "If we kill him, we must kill him outright. But we can't do that, not as things are. Poor wretch. He's done us no harm." "Oh, hasn't he?" said Sam, dropping his shoulder. "Anyway, he meant to, and he means to, I warrant. Godless now, sleep, that's his plan." "I dare say," said Frodo, "but what he means to do is another matter." He paused for a while in thought. Gollum lay still, but stopped whimpering. Sam stood glowering over him. It seemed to Frodo then that he heard, quite plainly but far off, voices out of the past. What a pity Bilbo did not stab the vile creature when he had a chance. Pity? It was pity that stayed his hand. Pity and mercy, not to strike without need. I don't feel any pity for Gollum. He deserves death. Deserves death? I dare say he does. Many that live deserve death, and some die that deserve life. Can you give that to them? Then be not too eager to deal out death in the name of justice, fearing for your own safety. Even the wise cannot see all ends. Very well, he answered aloud, lowering his sword. But still I'm afraid. And yet, as you see, I won't touch the creature, for now that I see him, I do pity him. Sam stared at his master, who seemed to be speaking to someone who was not there. Gollum lifted his head. Yes, wretched we are, precious, you mind? Misery, misery. Hobbits won't kill us. Nice hobbits. No, we won't, said Frodo. But we won't let you go either. You're full of wickedness and mischief, Gollum. You'll have to come with us, that's all, while we keep an eye on you. But you must help us, if you can. One good turn deserves another. Yes, yes, indeed, said Gollum, sitting up. Nice hobbits. Will you come with them? Find them safe paths in the dark. Yes, we will. And where are they going in these cold, hard lands, we wonder? Yes, we wonder. He looked up at them, and a faint light of cunning and eagerness flickered for a second at his pale, blinking eyes. Sam scowled at him, sucked his teeth, but he seemed to sense that there was something odd about his master's mood, and that the matter was beyond argument. All the same, he was amazed at Frodo's reply. Frodo looked straight into Gollum's eyes, which flinched and twisted away. You know that, or you guess well enough, Smeagol, he said, quietly and sternly. We are going to Mordor, of course, and you know the way there, I believe. Hush, said Gollum, covering his ears with his hands, as if such frankness, and the open speaking of the names, hurt him. We guessed, yes, we guessed, he whispered, and we didn't want them to go, did we? No, precious, not the nice hobbits. Ashes, and dust, and thirst there is, and pits, and orcs, thousands of orcs. Says, nice hobbits mustn't go to those places. So you have been there, Frodo insisted, and you're being drawn back there, aren't you? Yes, yes, no, shrieked Gollum. Once by accident it was, wasn't it, precious? Yes, by accident. But we won't go back. No, no. Then suddenly his voice and language changed, and he sobbed in his throat, and spoke but not then. Leave me alone. Oh, my poor hands. I don't want to come back. I can't find it. I'm tired. We can't find it. Oh, no, nowhere. They're always awake. Dwarves, men, and elves. Elves with bright eyes. Can't find it. Ah! He got up and clenched his long hand into a bony, fleshless knot, shaking it towards the east. We won't, he cried. Not for you. Then he collapsed again. Gollum, he whispered with his face to the ground. Don't look at us. Go away. Go to sleep. He won't go away or go to sleep at your command, Smeagol, said Frodo. But if you really wish to be free of him again, then you must help me. And that, I fear, means finding us a path towards him. But you needn't go all the way, not beyond the gates of his land. Gollum sat up again and looked at him under his eyelids. He's over there, he cackled. Always there. Orcs will take you all the way. Easy to find orcs east of the river. Don't ask Smeagol. Oh, poor Smeagol. He went away long ago. They took his precious, and he's lost now. Perhaps we'll find him again if you come with us, said Frodo. No, no, never. He's lost his precious, said Gollum. Get up, said Frodo. Gollum stood up and backed away against the cliff. Now, said Frodo, can you find the path easier by day or by night? We're tired, but if you choose the night, we'll start tonight. The big lights hurt our eyes, they do, Gollum whined. Not under the white face, not yet. It will go behind the hills soon, yes. Rest a bit first. Nice hobbits. Then sit down, said Frodo, and don't move. The hobbits seated themselves beside him, one on either side, with their backs to the stony wall, resting their legs. There was no need for any arrangement by word. They knew that they mustn't sleep for a moment. Slowly the moon went by. Shadows fell down from the hills, and all grew dark before them. The stars grew thick and bright in the sky above. No one stirred. Gollum sat with his legs drawn up, knees under chin, flat hands and feet splayed on the ground. His eyes closed, but he seemed tense, as if thinking or listening. Frodo looked across at Sam. Their eyes met and they understood. They relaxed, leaning their heads back and shutting their eyes or seeming to. Soon the sound of their soft breathing could be heard. Gollum's hands twitched a little. Hardly perceptibly his head moved to the left and the right, and first one eye and then the other opened a slit. The hobbits made no sign. Suddenly, with startling agility and speed, straight off the ground with a jump like a grasshopper or a frog, Gollum bounded forward into the darkness. That was just what Frodo and Sam had expected. Sam was on him before he had gone 2 paces after his spring. Frodo, coming behind, grabbed his legs and threw him. "Your rope might be useful again, Sam," he said. Sam got off the rope. "And where were you off to in the cold, hard lands, Mr. Gollum?" he growled. "We wonders, aye, we wonders. To find some of your orc friends, I warrant, you nasty, treacherous creature. It's round your neck this rope ought to go, and a tight noose too." Gollum lay quiet and tried no further tricks. He didn't answer Sam, but gave him a swift, venomous look. "All we need is something to keep a hold on him," said Frodo. "We wanted to walk, so it's no good tying his legs or his arms. He seems to use them nearly as much. Tie one end to his ankle and keep a grip on the other end." He stood over Gollum while Sam tied the knot. The result surprised them both. Gollum began to scream, a thin, tearing sound, very horrible to hear. He writhed and tried to get his mouth to his ankle and bite the rope. He kept on screaming. At last Frodo was convinced that he really was in pain, but it couldn't be from the knot. He examined it and found that it wasn't too tight, indeed hardly tight enough. Sam was gentle in his words. "What's the matter with you?" he said. "If you try to run away, you must be tied, but we don't wish to hurt you." "It hurts us, hissed Gollum. "It freezes, it bites. Elves twisted it, curse them, nasty, cruel hobbits. That's why we tries to escape. Of course it is, precious. We guessed they were cruel hobbits. They visit elves, fierce elves with bright eyes. Take it off us, it hurts us." "No, I won't take it off you," said Frodo. "Not unless—" He paused a moment in thought. "Not unless there is any promise you can make that I can trust." "We will swear to do what he wants, yes, said Gollum, still twisting and grabbing at his ankle. "It hurts us." "Swear," said Frodo. "Smeagol," said Gollum suddenly and clearly, opening his eyes wide and staring at Frodo with a strange light. "Smeagol will swear on the precious." Frodo drew himself up, and again Sam was startled by his words and his stern voice. "On the precious? How dare you?" he said. "Think. One ring to rule them all, and in the darkness bind them. Would you commit your promise to that, Smeagol? It will hold you, but it's more treacherous than you are. It may twist your words. Beware." Gollum cowered. On the precious, he repeated. "And what would you swear?" asked Frodo.
Hey, Chris, how you doing, bro? Good to see you.
To Frodo's feet, he groveled before him, whispering
Hope you're
hoarsely.
doing well.
A shudder ran over him, as if the words shook his very bones with fear. "Smeagol will swear never to let him have it. Never. Smeagol will save it. But he must swear on the precious." "No, not on it," said Frodo, looking down at him with stern pity. "All you wish is to see it and touch it if you can, though you know it would drive you mad. Not on it. Swear by it if you will, for you know where it is. Yes, you know, Smeagol. It's before you." For a moment it appeared to Sam that his master had grown and Gollum had shrunk. A tall, stern shadow, a mighty lord who hid his brightness in grey cloud, and at his feet a little whining dog. Yet the two were in some way akin and not alien. They could reach one another's minds. Gollum raised himself and began pawing at Frodo, fawning at his...
Bravo, Chris. Content de te voir. J'espère que tu vas bien.
Fawning at his knees. Down, down, said Frodo. Now speak your promise. Promises. Yes, I promise, said Gollum. I will serve the master of the precious. Good master. Good Smeagol. Suddenly he began to weep and bite at his ankle again. Take the rope, said Frodo. At once,
Hey, OG, how you doing, bro?
Like a whisper whose master has patted it. The change, which lasted for some time, came over him. He spoke with less hissing and whining, and he spoke to his companions direct, not to his presence.
Hell yeah, OG.
He would cringe and flinch if they stepped near him or made any sudden movement, and he avoided the touch of their elven cloaks. But he was friendly, and indeed pitifully anxious to please. He would cackle with laughter and caper if any jest was made, or even if Frodo spoke kindly to him, and weep if Frodo rebuked him. Sam said little to him of any sort. He suspected him more deeply than ever. Like the new Gollum, the Smeagol, less than the old. Well, Gollum, or whatever it is we're to call you, he said. Now for it. The moon's gone, and the night's going. We'd better start. Skipping about. Up we go. There's only one way across between the north and the south end.
I'm not doing too bad.
Orcs don't use it. Orcs don't know it. Orcs don't cross the marshes. They go round the
Can't complain too much, I guess.
Very lucky you came this way. Very lucky you found Smeagol. Yes, follow Smeagol. He took a few steps away and looked back inquiringly, like a dog inviting them for a walk. Wait a bit, Gollum, cried Sam. Not too far ahead now. I'm going to beat your tail, and I've got the rope handy. No, no, said Gollum. Smeagol promised. In the deep of night, under hard, clear stars, they set off. Gollum led them back northward for a while, along the way that they had come. Then he slanted to the right, away from the steep edge of the Emyn Muil, the broken stony slopes towards the vast fens below. They faded swiftly and softly into the darkness. Over all the leagues of waste before the gates of Mordor, there was a black silence. Chapter 2. The Passage of the Marshes.
That sucks, Christopher. Hope everything goes well for him.
Often using his hands as well as his feet. Frodo and Sam were hard put to it to keep up with him. But he seemed no longer to have any thought of escaping. If they fell behind, he would turn and wait for them. After a time, he brought them to the brink of the narrow gully that they had struck before. But they were now further down the hills. Here it is, he cried. There is a way down inside. Yes. Now we follows it out away over there. He pointed south and east towards the marshes. The reek of them came to their nostrils, heavy and foul, even in the cool night air. Gollum cast up and down along the brink, and at length he called to them. Here, we can get down here. Smeagol went this way once. I went this way, hiding from orcs. He led the way, and following him, the hobbits climbed down into the gloom. It was not difficult, for the rift was at this point only some 15 feet deep and about a dozen across. There was running water at the bottom. It was, in fact, the bed of one of the many small rivers that trickled down from the hills to feed the stagnant pools and miles beyond. Gollum turned to the right, southward more or less, and splashed along with his feet in the shallow, stony stream. He seemed greatly delighted to feel the water, and chuckled to himself, sometimes even croaking in a sort of song. That cold hard land, they bite so
Oh, damn.
they know
That sucks, Christopher.
The rocks
I hope he gets
stones
better.
are like old bones, all bare of me. That stream and pool is wet and cool, so nice for feet. And now we wish. What does we wish? He said, looking sidelong at the hobbits. We'll tell you, he croaked. He guessed it long ago.
Ça craint. J'espère qu'il ira mieux.
Baggins guessed it. A glint came into his eyes, and Sam, catching the gleam in the darkness, thought it far from pleasant. Alive without breath, as cold as death, never thirsty, ever drinking, clad in mail, never clinking, drowns on dry land, thinks an island is a mountain, thinks a fountain is a puff of air. So sleek, so fair, what a joy to me. We only wish to catch a fish so juicy sweet. These words only made more pressing to Sam's mind a problem that had been troubling him from the moment when he understood that his master was going to adopt Gollum as a guide, the problem of food. It didn't occur to him that his master might also have thought of it, but he supposed Gollum had. Indeed, how had Gollum kept himself in all his lonely wandering? Not thought Sam. He looks fair famished. Not too dang to try what hobbit tastes like. If there ain't no fish, I'll wager. Supposing as he could catch us napping. Well, he won't. Not Sam Gamgee, for one. They stumbled along in the dark, winding gully for a long time, for so it seemed to the tired feet of Frodo and Sam. The gully turned eastward, and as they went on, it broadened and got gradually shallower. At last the sky above grew faint with the first grey of morning. Gollum had shown no signs of tiring, but now he looked up and halted. Day is near, he whispered, as if day was something that might overhear him and spring on him.
Nice. That's good.
Here. I will stay here, and the yellow face won't see me. We should be glad to see the sun, said Frodo. But we'll stay here. We're too tired to go on any further at present. You're not wise to be glad of the yellow face, said Gollum. It shows you up. Nice, sensible hobbits, stay with Smeagol. Orcs and nasty things are about. They can see a long way. Stay and hide with me. The three of them settled down to rest at the foot of the rocky wall of the gully. It was not much more than a tall man-pipe now, and at its base there were wide, flat shelves of dry stone. The water ran in a channel on the other side. Frodo and Sam sat on one of the flats, resting their backs. Gollum paddled and scrabbled in the stream. We must take a little food, said Frodo. Are you hungry, Smeagol? We have very little to share, but we will spare you what we can. At the word hungry, a greenish light was kindled in Gollum's pale eyes, and they seemed to protrude further than ever from his thin, sickly face. For a moment he relapsed into his old Gollum manner. We are famished, yes, famished we are, precious, he said. What is it they eat? Have they nice fishes? His tongue lolled out between his sharp yellow teeth, licking his colourless lips. No, we've got no fish, said Frodo. We have only got this. He held up a wafer of lembas. And water, if the water here's fit to drink. Yes, nice water, said Gollum. Drink it while we can.
Oh, I don't like hospitals either. But I've had a lot of different hospital stays for different injuries I've had.
Frodo broke off a portion of a wafer and handed it to him on its leaf wrapping. Gollum sniffed at the leaf and his face changed. The spatter of the
So I've never really care too much for any hospitals.
Smeagol smells it, he said. Leaves out of the elf country. It stinks. He climbed in those trees and he couldn't wash the smell off his hands. Mind his hands. Dropping them, he took a corner of the lembas and nibbled it. He spat, and a fit of coughing shook him. No, he stuttered. You've got to chuff for Smeagol. No, and that's it. He can't eat that. He must starve. But Smeagol doesn't mind nice hobbits. Smeagol has promised he will starve. He can't eat hobbit food. He will starve. Poor thin Smeagol. I'm sorry, said Frodo, but I can't help you, I'm afraid. I think this food would do you good if you would try, but perhaps you can't even try. Not yet, anyway. The hobbits munched their lembas in silence. Sam thought it had tasted far better somehow than it had for a good while. Gollum's behavior had made him attend to its flavor again. But he didn't feel comfortable. Gollum watched every morsel from hand to mouth, like an expectant dog by a diner's chair. Only when they'd finished and were preparing to rest was he apparently convinced that they had no hidden dainties that he could share in. Then he went and sat by himself a few paces away and whimpered. Look here, Sam whispered to Frodo, not too softly. He didn't really care whether Gollum heard him or not. We've got to get some sleep, but not both together with that hungry villain nigh, promise or no promise. Smeagol or Gollum, he won't change his habits in a hurry, I'll warrant. You go to sleep, Mr. Frodo, and I'll call you when I can't keep my eyelids propped up. Turning about, same as before, while he's loose. Perhaps you're right, Sam, said Frodo, speaking openly. There is a change in him, but just what kind of change and how deep, I'm not sure yet. Seriously, though, I don't think there's any need for fear at present. Still, what if you wish? Give me about 2 hours, not more, and then call me. So tired was Frodo that his head fell forward on his breast, and he slept almost as soon as he'd spoken the words. Gollum seemed no longer to have any fears. He curled up and went quickly to sleep, quite unconcerned. Presently his breath was hissing softly through his clenched teeth, but he lay still as stone. After a while, fearing that he'd drop off himself if he sat listening to his two companions' breathing, Sam got up and gently trotted home. His hands uncurled and twitched, but he made no other movement. Sam bent down and said, "Shh," close to his ear, but there was no response, not even a catch in Gollum's breathing. Sam scratched his head. "It must really be asleep," he muttered. "And if I was like Gollum, he wouldn't wake up never again." He restrained the thoughts of his sword and the rope that sprang to his mind, and went and sat down by his master. When he woke up, the sky above was dim, not lighter, but darker than when they had breakfasted. Sam leapt to his feet. Not least from his own feeling of vigor and hunger, he suddenly understood that he'd slept the daylight away, 9 hours at least. Frodo was still fast asleep, lying now stretched on his side. Gollum wasn't to be seen. Various reproachful names for himself came to Sam's mind, drawn from the Gaffer's large paternal word hoard. Then it also occurred to him that his master had been right. There had for the present been nothing to guard against. They were, at any rate, both alive and unthrottled. Poor wretch, he said half remorselessly. Now I wonder where he's got to. Doctor, said a voice above him. He looked up and saw the shape of Gollum's large head and ears against the evening sky. "Here, what are you doing?" cried Sam, his suspicions coming back as soon as he saw the shape. "Smeagol is hungry," said Gollum. "Be back soon." "Come back now," shouted Sam. "Aye, come back." But Gollum had vanished. Frodo woke at the sound of Sam's shout, sat up, rubbing his eyes. "Hello," he said. "Anything wrong? What's the time?" "I don't know," said Sam. "After sundown, I reckon. And he's gone off. Says he's hungry." "Don't worry," said Frodo. There's no help for it, but he'll come back, you'll see. The promise will hold yet a while, and he won't leave his precious anyway. Frodo made light of it when he learned that they had slept soundly for hours with Gollum, and a very hungry Gollum too, loose beside them. Don't think of any of your guesses hard things, he said. You were worn out. It's turned out well. We're now both rested, and we've a hard road ahead, the worst road of all. About the food, said Sam. How long's it going to take us to do this job? And when it's done, what are we going to do then? This whey bread keeps you on your legs in a wonderful way, though it doesn't satisfy the innards proper, as you might say. Not to my feeling, anyhow, meaning no disrespect to them as made it. But you have to eat some of it every day, and it doesn't grow. I reckon we've got enough to last, say, 3 weeks or so, and that with a tight belt and a light tooth, mind you. We've been a bit free with it so far. I don't know how long we should take to finish, said Frodo. We were miserably delayed in the hills, but Samwise Gamgee, my dear hobbit, indeed, Sam, my dearest hobbit, friend of friends. I don't think we need to give thought to what comes after that. To do the job, as you put it, what hope is there that we ever shall? And if we do, who knows what will come of that?
Hey,
One goes
Noda.
far and we're at hand. I ask you, Sam.
I decided to change the light bulb from a green one to my blue one.
That's all we can do. More than I can, I begin to feel. Sam nodded silently.
I just need to get one of those fancy ones so I could change it. But I just changed the light bulbs now. I need to get another red one, and there's another one I want to get. I think it's like an orange one.
It was actually not long before Gollum returned, but he came so quietly that they didn't hear him till he stood before them. His fingers and face were soiled with black mud. He was still chewing and slobbering. What he was chewing, they didn't ask or like to think. Worms or beetles or something slimy out of holes, thought Sam. Brr, the nasty creature, the poor wretch.
Oh yeah. How you been doing, Crystal?
Until he drank deeply and washed himself in the stream. Then he came up to them, licking his lips. Better now, he said. Are we rested? Ready to go on? Nice hobbits, they sleep beautifully.
I hate not having my glasses.
Very good. The next stage of their journey was much the same as the last. As they went on, the gully became even shallower and the slope of its floor more gradual. Its bottom was less stony and more earthy, and slowly its sides dwindled to mere banks. It began to wind and wander. That night drew to its end, but clouds were now over moon and star, and they knew of the coming of day only by the slow spreading of the thin grey light. In a chill hour they came to the end of the watercourse. The banks became moss-grown mounds. Over the last shelf of rotting stone, the stream gurgled and fell down into a brown bog that was lost. Dry reeds hissed and rattled, though they could feel no wind. On either side and in front, wide fens and mares now lay, stretching away southward and eastward into the dim half-light. Mists curled and smoked from dark and noisome pools. The reek of them hung stifling in the still air. Far away, now almost due south, the mountain walls of Mordor loomed like a black bar of rugged clouds floating above a dangerous fog-bound sea. The hobbits were now wholly in the hands of Gollum. They didn't know, and couldn't guess in that misty light, that they were in fact only just within the northern borders of the marshes, the main expanse of which lay south of them. They could, if they'd known the lands, with some delay have retraced their steps a little, and then turning east have come round over hard roads to the bare plain of Dagorlan, the field of the ancient battle before the gates of Mordor. Not that there was great hope in such a course. On that stony plain there was no cover, and across it ran the highways of the orcs and the soldiers of the enemy. Not even the cloaks of Lorien would have concealed them there. "How do we shape our course now, Smeagol?" asked Frodo. "Must we cross these evil-smelling fens?" "No need at all," said Gollum. "Not if hobbits want to reach the Dark Mountains and go to see him very quick. Back a little, round a little." His skinny arm waved north and east. "And you can come on hard, cold roads to the very gates of his country. Lots of his people would be there looking out for guests. Very pleased to take them straight to him. Oh, yes. His eye watches that way all the time. It caught Smeagol there long ago." Gollum shuddered. "But Smeagol has used his eyes since then. Yes. I've used eyes and feet and nose since then. I know other ways. More difficult, not so quick, but better. If we don't want him to see, follow Smeagol. He can take you through the marshes, through the mists, nice thick mists. Follow Smeagol very carefully, and you may go a long way, quite a long way, before he catches you. Yes, perhaps." It was already day, a windless and sullen morning, and the marsh reach lay in heavy banks. No sun pierced the low, clouded sky, and Gollum seemed anxious to continue the journey at once. So after a brief rest, they set out again and were soon lost in a shadowy, silent world, cut off from all view of the lands about, either the hills that they had left or the mountains that they sought. They went slowly in single file, Gollum, Sam, Frodo. Frodo seemed the most weary of the three, and slow though they went, he often lagged. The hobbits soon found that what had looked like one vast fen was really an endless network of pools and soft mires and winding, half-strangled watercourses. Among these a cunning eye and foot could thread a wandering path. Gollum certainly had that cunning and needed all of it. His head on its long neck was ever turning this way and that, while he sniffed and muttered all the time to himself. Sometimes he would hold up his hand and halt them, while he went forward a little, crouching, testing the ground with fingers or toes, or merely listening with one ear pressed to the earth. It was dreary and wearisome. Cold, clammy winter still held sway in this forsaken country. The only green was the scum of livid weed on the dark, greasy surfaces of the sullen waters. Dead grasses and rotting weeds loomed up in the mists like ragged shadows of long-forgotten summers. As the day wore on, the light increased a little, and the mists lifted, growing thinner and more transparent. Far above the rot and vapors of the world, the sun was riding high and golden now in a serene country with floors of dazzling foam. But only a passing ghost of her could they see below, blear, pale, giving no color, no warmth. But even at this faint reminder of her presence, Gollum scowled and blinked. He halted their journey, and they rested, squatting like little hunted animals in the borders of a great brown reed thicket. There was a deep silence, only scraped on its surface by the faint quiver of empty seed plumes and broken grass blades trembling in small air movements that they could not feel. "Not a bird," said Sam mournfully. No birds," said Gollum. "Nice birds." He licked his lips. "No birds here. There are snakes, says. Broom, says. Things in the pools. Lots of things. Lots of nasty things. No birds," he ended sadly. Sam looked at him with distaste. So passed the third day of their journey with Gollum. Before the shadows of evening were long in happier lands, they went on again, always on and on with only brief halts. These they made not so much for rest as to help Gollum, for now even he had to go forward with great care, and he was sometimes at a loss for a while. They'd come to the very midst of the dead marshes, and it was dark. They walked slowly, stooping, keeping close in line, following attentively every move that Gollum made. The fens grew more wet, opening into wide, stagnant meres, amongst which it grew more and more difficult to find the firmer places where feet could tread without sinking into gurgling mud. The travellers were light, or maybe none of them would ever have found a way through. Presently it grew altogether dark. The air itself seemed black and heavy to breathe. When lights appeared, Sam rubbed his eyes. He thought his head was going queer. He first saw one with the corner of his left eye, a wisp of pale sheen that faded away, but others appeared soon after, some like dimly shining smoke, some like misty flames flickering slowly above unseen candles. Here and there they twisted like ghostly sheets unfurled by hidden hands, but neither of his companions spoke a word. At last Sam could bear it no longer. "What's all this, Gollum?" he said in a whisper. "These lights, they're all round us now. Are we trapped? Who are they?" Gollum looked up. A dark water was before him, and he was crawling on the ground, this way and that, doubtful of the way. "Yes, they are all round us," he whispered. "The tricksy lights. Candles of corpses. Yes, yes. Don't you heed them. Don't look. Don't follow them. Where's the master?" Sam looked back and found that Frodo had lagged again. He couldn't see him. He went some paces back into the darkness, not daring to move far, or to call in more than a hoarse whisper. Suddenly he stumbled against Frodo, who was standing lost in thought, looking at the pale lights. His hands hung stiff at his sides. Water and slime were dripping from them. "Come, Mr. Frodo," said Sam. "Don't look at them. Gollum says we mustn't. Let's keep up with him and get out of this cursed place as quick as we can, if we can." "All right," said Frodo, as if returning out of a dream. "I'm coming. Go on." Hurrying forward again, Sam tripped, catching his foot in some old root or tussock. He fell and came heavily on his hands, which sank deep into sticky ooze, so that his face was brought close to the surface of the dark mere. There was a faint hiss. A noisome smell went up. The lights flickered and danced and swirled. For a moment the water below him looked like some window, glazed with grimy glass, through which he was peering. Wrenching his hands out of the bog, he sprang back with a cry. "There are dead things, dead faces in the water," he said with horror. "Dead faces." Gollum laughed. "The dead marshes, yes, yes, that is their names," he cackled. "You shouldn't look in when the candles are lit." "Who are they? What are they?" asked Sam, shuddering, turning to Frodo, who was now behind him. "I don't know," said Frodo in a dreamlike voice. "But I've seen them too, in the pools when the candles were lit. They lie in all the pools, pale faces, deep, deep under the dark water. I saw them, grim faces and evil, and noble faces and sad, many faces proud and fair, and weeds in their silver hair, but all foul, all rotting, all dead. A fell light is in them." Frodo hid his eyes in his hands. "I know not who they are, but I thought I saw them men and elves and orcs beside them." "Yes, yes," said Gollum. "All dead, all rotten, elves and men and orcs, the dead marshes. There was a great battle long ago, yes, so they told him when Smeagol was young, when I was young before the Precious came. It was a great battle, tall men with long swords and terrible elves and orcs shrieking. They fought on the plain for days and months at the Black Gates, but the marshes have grown since then, swallowing up the graves, always creeping. "But that's an age and more ago," said Sam. The dead can't be really there. Is it some devilry hatched in the dark land? Who knows? Smeagol doesn't know, answered Gollum. You cannot reach them. You cannot touch them. We tried once, yes, precious, I tried once. But you cannot reach them. Only shapes to see, perhaps, not to touch. No, precious, all dead. Sam looked darkly at him and shuddered again, thinking that he guessed why Smeagol had tried to touch them. Well, I don't want to see them, he said. Never again. Can't we get on and get away? Oh, yes, said Gollum, but slowly, very carefully. Or hobbits go down to join the dead ones and light little candles. Follow Smeagol, don't look at lights. He crawled away to the right, seeking for a path round the mere. They came close behind, stooping, often using their hands even as he did. 3 precious little Gollums in a row we shall be if this goes on much longer, thought Sam. At last they came to the end of the Black Mere, and they crossed it perilously, crawling or hopping from one treacherous island tussock to another. Often they floundered, stepping or falling hands first into waters as noisome as a cesspool, till they were slimed and fouled almost up to their necks and stank in one another's nostrils. It was late in the night when at length they reached firmer ground again. Gollum hissed and whispered to himself, but it appeared that he was pleased. In some mysterious way, by some blended sense of feel and smell and uncanny memory for shapes in the dark, he seemed to know just where he was again, and to be sure of his road again. Now on we go, he said. Nice hobbits, brave hobbits, very weary, of course. So we are, my precious, all of us, but we must take master away from the wicked lights. Yes, we must. With these words he started off again, almost at a trot, down what appeared to be a long lane between high reeds, and they stumbled after him as quickly as they could. But in a little while he stopped suddenly and sniffed the air doubtfully, hissing as if he was troubled or displeased again. What is it? Growled Sam, misinterpreting the signs. What's the need to sniff? The stink nearly knocks me down with my nose held. You stink and master stinks, the whole place stinks. Yes, and Sam stinks, answered Gollum. Poor Smeagol smells it, but good Smeagol bears it. Helps nice master, but that's no matter. The air's moving, change is coming. Smeagol wonders, he's not happy. He went on again, but his uneasiness grew, and every now and again he stood up to his full height, craning his neck eastward and southward. For some time the hobbits could not hear or feel what was troubling him. Then suddenly all 3 halted, stiffening and listening. To Frodo and Sam it seemed that they heard, far away, a long wailing cry, high and thin and cruel. They shivered. At the same moment the stirring of the air became perceptible to them, and it grew very cold. As they stood straining their ears, they heard a noise like a wind coming in the distance. The misty lights wavered, dimmed, and went out. Gollum wouldn't move. He stood shaking and gibbering to himself, until with a rush the wind came upon them, hissing and snarling over the marshes. The night became less dark, light enough for them to see, or half see, shapeless drifts of fog, curling and twisting as it rolled over them and past them. Looking up, they saw the clouds breaking and shredding, and then high in the south the moon glimmered out, riding in the flying wrack. For a moment the sight of it gladdened the hearts of the hobbits, but Gollum cowered down, muttering curses on the white face. Then Frodo and Sam, staring at the sky, breathing deeply of the fresher air, saw it come. A small cloud flying from the accursed hills, a black shadow loosed from Mordor, a vast shape winged and ominous. It scudded across the moon, and with a deadly cry went away westward, outrunning the wind in its fell speed. They fell forward, groveling heedlessly on the cold earth. But the shadow of horror wheeled and returned, passing lower now, right above them, sweeping the fenreek with its ghastly wings. And then it was gone, flying back to Mordor with the speed of the wrath of Sauron, and behind it the wind roared away, leaving the dead marshes bare and bleak. The naked waste, as far as the eye could pierce, even to the distant menace of the mountains, was dappled with the fitful moonlight. Frodo and Sam got up, rubbing their eyes, like children wakened from an evil dream to find the familiar night still over the world. But Gollum lay on the ground as if he'd been stunned. They roused him with difficulty, and for some time he wouldn't lift his face, but knelt forward on his elbows, covering the back of his head with his large, flat hands. "Wraiths," he wailed. "Wraiths on wings. The precious is their master. They see everything, everything. Nothing can hide from them. Curse the white face. And they tell him everything. He sees, he knows. Gollum." It was not until the moon had sunk, westering far beyond tall Brandir, that he would get up or make a move. From that time on, Sam thought that he sensed a change in Gollum again. He was more fawning and would be friendly, but Sam surprised some strange looks in his eyes at times, especially towards Frodo, and he went back more and more into his old manner of speaking. And Sam had another growing anxiety. Frodo seemed to be weary to the point of exhaustion. He said nothing. Indeed, he hardly spoke at all, and he didn't complain, but he walked like one who carries a load, the weight of which is ever increasing, and he dragged along, slower and slower, so that Sam had often to beg Gollum to wait and not to leave their master behind. In fact, with every step towards the gates of Mordor, Frodo felt the ring on its chain about his neck grow more burdensome. He was now beginning to feel it as an actual weight dragging him earthwards. But far more he was troubled by the eye, so he called it to himself. It was that, more than the drag of the ring, that made him cower and stoop as he walked. The eye, that horrible growing sense of a hostile will that strove with great power to pierce all shadows of cloud and earth and flesh, and to see you, to pin you under its deadly gaze, naked, immovable. So thin, so frail and thin, the veils would become that still warded it off. Frodo knew just where the present habitation and heart of that will now was, as certainly as a man can tell the direction of the sun with his eyes shut. He was facing it, and its potency beat upon his brow. Gollum probably felt something of the same sort. But what went on in his wretched heart, between the pressure of the eye and the lust of the ring that was so near, and his grovelling promise made half in the fear of cold iron, the hobbit didn't guess. Frodo gave no thought to it. Sam's mind was occupied mostly with his master, hardly noticing the dark cloud that had fallen on his own heart. He put Frodo in front of him now, and kept a watchful eye on every movement of his, supporting him if he stumbled, and trying to encourage him with clumsy words. When day came at last, the hobbits were surprised to see how much closer the ominous mountains had already drawn. The air was now clearer and colder, and though still far off, the walls of Mordor were no longer a cloudy menace on the edge of sight, but as grim black towers they frowned across a dismal waste. The marshes were at an end, dying away into dead peats and wide flats of dry, cracked mud. The land ahead rose in long, shallow slopes, barren and pitiless, towards the desert that lay at Sauron's gate. While the grey light lasted, they cowered under a black stone like worms, shrinking, lest the winged terror should pass and spy them with its cruel eyes. The remainder of that journey was a shadow of growing fear in which memory could find nothing to rest upon. For 2 more nights they struggled on through the weary, pathless land. The air, as it seemed to them, grew harsh and filled with a bitter reek that caught their breath and parched their mouths. At last, on the 5th morning since they took the road with Gollum, they halted once more. Before them, dark in the dawn, the great mountains reached up to roofs of smoke and cloud. Out from their feet were flung huge buttresses and broken hills that were now at the nearest scarce a dozen miles away. Frodo looked round him in horror. Dreadful as the dead marshes had been, and the arid moors of the no-man lands, more loathsome far was the country that the crawling day now slowly unveiled to his shrinking eyes. Even to the mere of dead faces, some haggard phantom of green spring would come. But here neither spring nor summer would ever come again. Here nothing lived, not even the leprous growths that feed on rottenness. The gasping pools were choked with ash and crawling muds, sickly white and grey, as if the mountains had vomited the filth of their entrails upon the lands about. High mounds of crushed and powdered rock, great cones of earth, fire-blasted and poison-stained, stood like an obscene graveyard in endless rows, slowly revealed in the reluctant light. They had come to the desolation that lay before Mordor, the lasting monument to the dark labor of its slaves that should endure when all their purposes were made void. A land defiled, diseased beyond all healing, unless the great sea should enter in and wash it with oblivion. "I feel sick," said Sam. Frodo didn't speak. For a while they stood there, like men on the edge of a sleep where nightmare lurks, holding it off, though they know that they can only come to morning through the shadows. The light broadened and hardened. The gasping pits and poisonous mounds grew hideously clear. The sun was up, walking among clouds and long flags of smoke, but even the sunlight was defiled. The hobbits had no welcome for that light. Unfriendly it seemed, revealing them in their helplessness, little squeaking ghosts that wandered among the ash heaps of the Dark Lord. Too weary to go further, they sought for some place where they could rest. For a while they sat without speaking under the shadow of a mound of slag, that foul fumes leaked out of it, catching their throats and choking them. Gollum was the first to get up. Spluttering and cursing he rose, and without a word or a glance at the hobbits he crawled away on all fours. Frodo and Sam crawled after him, until they came to a wide, almost circular pit, high-banked upon the west. It was cold and dead, and a foul sump of oily, many-coloured ooze lay at its bottom. In this evil hole they cowered, hoping in its shadow to escape the attention of the Eye. The day passed slowly. A great thirst troubled them, but they drank only a few drops from their bottles, last filled in the gully, which now, as they looked back and thought, seemed to them a place of peace and beauty. The hobbits took it in turn to watch. At first, tired as they were, neither of them could sleep at all. But as the sun far away was climbing down into slow-moving cloud, Sam dozed. It was Frodo's turn to be on guard. He lay back on the slope of the pit, but that didn't ease the sense of burden that was on him. He looked up at the smoke-sticked sky and saw strange phantoms, dark riding shapes, and faces out of the past. He lost count of time, hovering between sleep and waking, until forgetfulness came over him. Suddenly Sam woke up, thinking that he heard his master calling. It was evening. Frodo could not have called, for he had fallen asleep and had slid down nearly to the bottom of the pit. Gollum was by him. For a moment, Sam thought that he was trying to rouse Frodo. Then he saw that it was not so. Gollum was talking to himself. Smeagol was holding debate with some other thought that used the same voice but made it squeak and hiss. A pale light and a green light alternated in his eyes as he spoke. "Smeagol promised," said the first voice. Yes, my precious," came the answer. "We promised. to save our precious, not to let him have it ever. And it's going to be, yes, nearer every step. What's the Hobbit going to do with it, we wonders? Yes, we wonders. I don't know. I can't help it. Master's got it. Smeagol promised to help the master. Yes, to help the master of the precious. But if we was master, then we could help ourselves, yes, and still keep promises. But Smeagol said he would be very good. Nice hobbit. He took cruel rope off Smeagol's leg. He speaks nicely to me. Very, very good, eh, my precious? Let's be good, good as fish, sweet one, but to ourselves. Not hurt the nice hobbit, of course. No. But the precious holds the promise. The voice of Smeagol objected. Then take it, said the other, and let's hold it ourselves. Then we shall be master, Gollum. Make the other hobbit, the nasty, suspicious hobbit, make him crawl. Yes, Gollum. But not the nice hobbit? Oh no, not if it doesn't please us. Still, he's a Baggins, my precious. Yes, a Baggins. A Baggins stone. He found it and he said nothing. Nothing. We hate Baggins says. No, not this Baggins. Yes, every Baggins. All peoples that keep the precious. We must have it. But he'll see, he'll know, he'll take it from us. He sees, he knows. He heard us make silly promises against his borders. Yes, must take it. The raids are searching. Must take it. Not for him. No, sweet one. See, my precious. If we has it, then we can escape, even from him. Perhaps we grow very strong, stronger than rays. Lord Smeagol, Gollum the Great, the Gollum. Eat fish every day, 3 times a day, fresh from the sea. Most precious Gollum. Must have it. We want it. We want it. We want it. But there's 2 of them. They'll wake too quick and kill us, whined Smeagol in the last effort. Not now, not yet. We want it back. And here there was a long pause, as if a new thought had wakened. Not yet. Perhaps not. She might help. She might. No, no, not that way, wailed Smeagol. Yes, we want it. We want it. Each time that the second thought spoke, Gollum's long hand crept out slowly, pawing towards Frodo, and then was drawn back with a jerk as Smeagol spoke again. Finally, both arms, with long fingers flexed and twitching, clawed towards his neck. Sam had lain still,
Yeah, plug this in.
by this dementia, yet watching every move that Gollum made from under his half-closed eyelids. To his simple mind, ordinary hunger, the desire to eat hobbits, had seemed the chief danger in Gollum. He realized now that it was not that. Gollum was feeling the terrible call of the ring. The was he, of course. But Sam wondered who she was. One of the nasty friends the little wretched maiden is wandering, he supposed. Then he forgot the point. For things had plainly gone far enough and were getting dangerous. A great heaviness was in all his limbs, but he roused himself with an effort and sat up. Something warned him to be careful, and not to reveal that he had overheard the debate. He let out a loud sigh and gave a huge yawn. "What's the time?" he said sleepily. Gollum sent out a long hiss through his teeth. He stood up for a moment, tense and menacing, and then he collapsed, falling forward onto all fours and crawling up the bank of the pit. "Nice hobbit, nice Sam," he said. "Sleepy heads, yes, sleepy heads. Leave good Smeagol to watch. But it's evening, dusk is creeping, time to go." High time, thought Sam, and time we parted too. Yet it crossed his mind to wonder if indeed Gollum was not now as dangerous turned loose as kept with them. Curse him! I wish he wasn't choked, he muttered. He stumbled down the bank and roused his master. Strangely enough, Frodo felt refreshed. He'd been dreaming. The dark shadow had passed, and a fair vision had visited him in this land of disease. Nothing remained of it in his memory, yet because of it, he felt glad and lighter of heart. His burden was less heavy on him. Gollum welcomed him with dog-like delight. He chuckled and chatted, cracking his long fingers and pawing at Frodo's knees. Frodo smiled at him. Come, he said. You've guided us well and faithfully. This is the last stage. Bring us to the gate, and then I'll not ask you to go further. Bring us to the gate, and you may go where you wish, only not to our enemies. To the gate, eh? Gollum squeaked, seeming surprised and frightened. To the gate, Master says. Yes, he says so, and good Smeagol does what he asks. Oh, yes, but when we get closer, we'll see, perhaps we'll see then. It won't look nice at all. Oh, no, oh, no. Go on with you, said Sam. Let's get it over. In the falling dusk, they scrambled out of the pit and slowly threaded their way through the dead land. They'd not gone far before they felt once more the fear that had fallen on them when the winged shape swept over the marshes. They halted, cowering on the evil-smelling ground. But they saw nothing in the gloomy evening sky above, and soon the menace passed, high overhead, going maybe on some swift errand from Barad-dûr. After a while, Gollum got up and crept forward again, muttering and shaking. About an hour after midnight, the fear fell on them a third time, but it now seemed more remote, as if it were passing far above the clouds, rushing with terrible speed into the west. Gollum, however, was helpless with terror, and was convinced that they were being hunted, that their approach was known. 3 times, he whimpered. 3 times is a threat. They feel us here. They feel the precious. The precious is their master. We cannot go any further this way. No, it's no use. No use. Pleading and kind words were no longer of any avail. It was not until Frodo commanded him angrily and laid a hand on his sword hilt that Gollum would get up again. Then at last he rose with a snarl and went before them like a beaten rock. So they stumbled on through the weary end of the night, and until the coming of another day of fear, they walked in silence with bowed heads, seeing nothing, and hearing nothing but the wind hissing in their ears. Chapter 3. The Black Gate is Closed. Before the next day dawned, their journey to Mordor was over. The marshes and the desert were behind them. Before them, darkling against a pallid sky, the great mountains reared their threatening heads. Upon the west of Mordor marched the gloomy range of Etheldur, the mountains of shadow, and upon the north the broken peaks and barren ridges of Ereblis. They approached one another, being indeed but parts of one great wall about the mournful plains of Lithlad and of Gorgoroth, and the bitter inland sea of Nornan amidmost. They swung out long arms northward, and between these arms there was a deep defile. This was Cirith Gorgor, the haunted path, the entrance to the land of the enemy. High cliffs lowered upon either side, and thrust forward from its mouth were 2 sheer hills, black-boned and bare. Upon them stood the teeth of Mordor, 2 towers strong and tall. In days long past, they were built by the men of Gondor in their pride and power, after the overthrow of Sauron and his flight, lest he should seek to return to his old realm. But the strength of Gondor failed, and they slept, and for long years the towers stood there. Then Sauron returned. Now the watchtowers, which had fallen into decay, were repaired and filled with arms, and garrisoned with ceaseless vigilance. Stony-faced they were, with dark window holes staring north and east and west, and each window was full of sleepless eyes. Across the mouth of the pass, from cliff to cliff, the Dark Lord had built a rampart of stone. In it there was a single bridge, and upon its battlement between the rock was bordered by trees and maggot holes. There a host of orcs lurked, ready at a signal to issue forth like black ants going to war. None could pass the teeth of Mordor without being their bite. Unless they were summoned by Sauron, secret passwords that would open the Moranglong, the black gate of his land. The two hobbits gazed at the towers and the wall in despair. Even from a distance they could see in the dim light the movement of the black guards upon the wall and the patrols before the gate. They lay now peering over the edge of a rocky hollow beneath the shadow of the northmost buttress of Etheldua. Winging the heavy air in a straight flight, a crow, maybe, would have flown but a furlong from their hiding place to the black sky curled above it, as if fire smouldered in the hill beneath. Day came, and the fallow sun blinked over the lifeless ridges of Ered Lithwy. Then suddenly the cry of brazen-throated trumpets was heard. From the watchtowers they bled, and far away from hidden holds and outposts in the hills came answering calls, and further still, remote but deep and ominous, there echoed in the hollow land beyond the horns and drums of Barad. Another dreadful day of fear and toil had come to Mordor, and the night guards were summoned to their dungeons and deep halls, and the day guards, evil-eyed and fell, were marching to their posts. Steel gleamed dimly on the battlement. Well, here we are. Here's the and it looks to me as if that's about as far as we're ever going to get. My word, Dapper would have a thing or two to say if he saw me now. Often said I'd come to a bad end if I didn't watch my step, he did. But now I don't suppose I'll ever see the old fellow again. He'll miss his chance of, I told you so, Sam. More's the pity. He could go on telling me as long as he'd got breath, if only I could see his old face again. But I'd have to get a wash first, or he wouldn't know me. I suppose it's no good asking, what way do we go now? We can't go no further, unless we want to ask the orcs for a lift. No, said Gollum. No use. We can't go further. Smeagol said so. He said, we'll go to the gate, and then we do see. I guess we do see. Smeagol knew hobbits could not go this way. Oh, yes, Smeagol knew. Then what the plague did you bring us here for? Said Sam, not feeling in the mood to be just or reasonable. Master said so. Master says, bring us to the gate. So good Smeagol does so. Master said so. Wise master. I did, Frodo. His face was grim and set, but resolute. He was filthy, haggard, and honest, but he cowered no longer, and his eyes were clear. I said so, because I purpose to enter Mordor, and I know no other way. Therefore I shall go this way. I don't ask anyone to go with me. No, master, wailed Gollum, pawing at him, and seeming in great distress. No use that way. No use. Don't take the precious from him. He'll eat us all if he gets it. Eat all the world. Keep it nice, master, and be kind to Smeagol. Don't let him have it. Or go away. Go to nice places and give it back to little Smeagol. Yes, master. Give it back. Smeagol will keep it safe. He will do lots of good, especially to nice hobbits. Hobbits go home. Don't go to the gate. I am commanded to go to the land of Mordor, and therefore I shall go, said Frodo. If there's only one way, then I must take it. What comes after must come. Sam said nothing. The look on Frodo's face was enough for him. He knew that words of his were useless. And after all, he never had any real hope in the affair from the beginning. Being a cheerful hobbit, he had not needed hope, as long as despair could be postponed. Now they were come to the bitter end. But he had stuck to his master all the way. That was what he'd chiefly come for, and he'd still stick to him. His master wouldn't go to Mordor alone. Sam would go with him, and at any rate, they would get rid of Gollum. Gollum, however, didn't intend to be got rid of yet. He knelt at Frodo's feet, wringing his hands and squeaking, "Not this way, master. There's another way. Oh, there is another way. More difficult to find, more secret. But Smeagol knows it. Let Smeagol show you." "Another way?" said Frodo doubtfully, looking down at Gollum with searching eyes. Yes, indeed. There was another way. Smeagol found it. Let's go and see if it's still there." "You haven't spoken of this before?" "No, Master didn't ask. Master didn't say what he meant to do. He doesn't. Smeagol, he says, Smeagol, take me to the gate, and then goodbye. Smeagol can run away and be good. But now he says, I purpose to enter Mordor this way. So Smeagol is very afraid. He doesn't want to lose nice Master. And he promised, Master made him promise to save the precious. But Master is going to take it to him, straight to the Black Hand, if Master will go this way. So Smeagol must save them both, and he thinks of another way that there was once upon a time. Nice Master, very good, always helps. Sam frowned. If he could have bored holes in Gollum with his eyes, he would have done. His mind was full of doubt. To all appearances, Gollum was genuinely distressed and anxious to help Frodo. But Sam, remembering the overheard debate, found it hard to believe that the long-submerged Smeagol had come out on top. That voice, at any rate, had not had the last word in the debate. Sam's guess was that the Smeagol and the Gollum halves, or what in his own mind he called Slinker and Stinker, had made a truce and a temporary alliance. Neither wanted the enemy to get the ring. Both wished to keep Frodo from capture, and under their eye, as long as possible, at any rate as long as Stinker still had a chance of laying hands on his precious. Whether there really was another way to Mordor, and it's a good thing neither half of the old villain don't know what Master means to do, he thought. If he knew that Mr. Frodo was trying to put an end to his precious for good and all, there'd be trouble pretty quick, I bet. And he's so frightened of the enemy, and he's under orders of some kind from him, or was, that he'd give us away, rather than be caught helping us, and rather than let his precious be melted, maybe. At least that's my idea, and I hope the Master will think it out carefully. He's as wise as any, but he's soft-hearted. That's what he is. It's beyond any Gamgee to guess what he'll do next. Frodo didn't answer Gollum at once. While these thoughts were passing through Sam's slow but shrewd mind, he stood gazing out towards the dark cliff of Cirith Gorgor. The hollow in which they had taken refuge was delved in the side of a low hill, at some little height above a long trench-like valley that lay between it and the outer buttresses of the mountains. In the midst of the valley stood the black foundations of the western watchtower. By morning light, the roads that converged upon the gate of Mordor could now be clearly seen, pale and dusky, one winding back northwards, another dwindling eastwards into the mists that clung about the feet of Ered Lithuin, and a third that ran towards him. As it bent sharply round the tower, it entered a narrow defile, and passed not far below the hollow where he stood. Westward to his right it turned, skirting the shoulders of the mountains, and went off southwards into the deep shadows that mantled all the western sides of Ethelduar. Beyond his sight it journeyed on into the narrow land between the mountains. As he gazed, Frodo became aware that there was a great stir and movement on the plain. It seemed as if whole armies were on the march, though for the most part they were hidden by the reeks and fumes drifting from the fens and wastes beyond. But here and there they caught the gleam of spears and helmets, and over the levels beside the road, horsemen could be seen riding in many companies. He remembered his vision from afar upon Armon Hen so few days before, though now it seemed many years ago. Then he knew that the hope that had for one wild moment stirred in his heart was vain. The trumpets had not rung in challenge, but in greeting. This was no assault upon the Dark Lord by the men of Gondor, risen like avenging ghosts from the graves of Valar long passed away. These were men of other race, out of the wide Eastlands, gathering to the summons of their overlord, armies that had encamped before his gate by night, and now marched in to swell his mounting power. As if suddenly made fully aware of the peril of their position, alone, in the growing light of day, so near to this vast menace, Frodo quickly drew his frail grey hood close upon his head and stepped down into the dell. Then he turned to Gollum. Smeagol, he said, I'll trust you once more. Indeed, it seems that I must do so, and that it's my fate to receive help from you, where I least look for it, and your fate to help me, whom you long pursued with evil purpose. So far, you've deserved well of me, and have kept your promise truly. Truly, I say and mean, he added with a glance at Sam, for twice now we've been in your power, and you've done no harm to us, nor have you tried to take from me what you once sought. May the third time prove the best, but I warn you, Smeagol, you are in danger. Yes, yes, master, said Gollum. Dreadful danger. Smeagol's bones shake to think of it. But he doesn't run away. He must help nice master. I didn't mean the danger that we all share, said Frodo. I mean the danger to yourself alone. You swore a promise by what you call the precious. Remember that. It'll hold you to it, but it will seek a way to twist it to your own undoing. Already you're being twisted. You revealed yourself to me just now foolishly. Give it back to Smeagol, you said. Don't say that again. Don't let that thought grow in you. You'll never get it back, but the desire of it may betray you to a bitter end. You'll never get it back. In the last need, Smeagol, I should put on the precious, and the precious mastered you long ago. If I, wearing it, were to command you, you would obey, even if it were to leap from a precipice or to cast yourself into the fire, and such would be my command. So have a care, Smeagol. Sam looked at his master with approval, but also with surprise. There was a look in his face and a tone in his voice that he hadn't known before. It had always been a notion of his that the kindness of dear Mr. Frodo was of such a high degree that it must imply a fair measure of blindness. Of course, he also firmly held the incompatible belief that Mr. Frodo was the wisest person in the world, with the possible exception of old Mr. Bilbo and of Gandalf. Gollum, in his own way, and with much more excuse as his acquaintance, was much briefer. He may have made a similar mistake, confusing kindness and blindness. At any rate, this speech abashed and terrified him. He grovelled on the ground, and could speak no clear words but, "Nice master." Frodo waited patiently for a while, then he spoke again, less sternly. "Come now, Gollum, or Smeagol, if you wish. Tell me of this other way, and show me, if you can, what hope there is in it, enough to justify me in turning aside from my plain path. I'm in haste." But Gollum was in a pitiable state, and Frodo's threat had quite unnerved him. It wasn't easy to get any clear account out of him, amid his mumblings and squeakings, and the frequent interruptions in which he crawled on the floor and begged them both to be kind to "poor little Smeagol." After a while he grew a little calmer, and Frodo gathered bit by bit that, if a traveller followed the road that turned west of Efelduar, He would come in time to a crossing in a circle of dark trees. On the right, the road went down towards Killiath and the bridges of the Anduin. In the middle, the road went on southwards. On, 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 said Gollum. We never went that way, but they say it goes 100 leagues until you can see the great water that is never still. There are lots of fishes there, and big birds eat fishes, nice birds, but we never went there, alas, no. We never had a chance, and further still there are more lands, they say, but the yellow face is very hot there, and there are seldom any clouds, and the men are fierce and have dark faces. We don't want to see that land. No, said Frodo, but don't wander from your road. What of the third turning? Oh yes, there is a third way, said Gollum. That is the road to the left, and once it begins to climb up, winding and climbing back towards the tall shadows. When it turns round the black rock, you'll see it. Suddenly you'll see it above you, and you'll want to hide. See it? See it? What will you see? The old fortress. Very old, very horrible now. We used to hear tales from the south when Smeagol was young, long ago. Oh yes, we used to tell lots of tales in the evening, sitting by the banks of the great river, in the willow lands, when the river was younger too. Oh, oh. He began to weep and mutter. The hobbits waited patiently. Tales of the south, Gollum went on again, about the tall men with the shining eyes, and their houses like hills of stone, and the silver crown of their king and his white tree. Wonderful tales. They built very tall towers, and one they raised was silver white, and in it there was a stone like the moon, and round it were great white walls. Oh yes, there were many tales about the Tower of the Moon. That would be Minas Ithil that Isildur, the son of Elendil, built, said Frodo. It was Isildur who cut off the finger of the enemy. Yes, he has only 4 on the black hand, but they are enough, said Gollum, shuddering, and he hated Isildur's city. What does he not hate, said Frodo, but what has the Tower of the Moon to do with us? Well, master, there it was, and there it is, the tall tower and the white houses and the wall, but not nice now, not beautiful. He conquered it long ago. It is a terrible place now. Travelers shiver when they see it. They creep out of sight. They avoid its shadow. But master will have to go that way. That is the only other way. For the mountains are lower there, and the old road goes up and up until it reaches a dark pass at the top, and then it goes down again to Gorgoroth. His voice sank to a whisper. He shuddered. But how will that help us? Oh, son, surely the enemy knows all about his own mountains, and that road will be guarded as close as this. The tower is empty. Oh, no, not empty, whispered Connor. It seems empty, but it isn't. Oh, no, very dreadful things live there. Orcs, yes, always orcs. But worse things live there too. The road climbs right under the shadow of the walls and passes the gate. Nothing moves on the road that they don't know about. The things inside know. The silent watchers. So that's your advice, is it? Said Sam. That we should go another long march south to find ourselves in the same fix or a worse one when we get there, if we ever do? No, indeed, said Gollum. Hobbits must see, must try to understand. He doesn't expect attack that way. His eye is all round, but it attends more to some places than to others. He can't see everything all at once, not yet. You see, he has conquered all the country west of the shadowy mountains down to the river, and he holds the bridges down. He thinks no one can come to the Moon Tower without fighting big battles at the bridges or getting lots of boats which they cannot hide, and he will know about it. You seem to know a lot about what he's doing and thinking, said Sam. Have you been talking to him lately, or just hobnobbing with orcs? Not nice, hobbit, not sensible, said Gollum, giving Sam an angry glance and turning to Frodo. Smeagol has talked to orcs, yes, of course, before he met Master, and to many peoples. He has walked very far, and what he says now many peoples are saying. It's here in the north that the big danger is for him and for us. He will come out of the Black Gate one day soon. That is the only way big armies can come. But away down west he is not afraid, and there are the silent watchers. Just so, said Sam, not to be put off. And so we're to walk up and knock at their gate and ask if we're on the right road for Mordor? Or are they too silent to answer? It's not sense. We might as well do it here and save ourselves a long tramp. Don't make jokes about it, hissed Gollum. It isn't funny, although not amusing. It's not sense to try and get into Mordor at all. But if Master says I must go or I will go, then he must try some way. But he must not go to the terrible city. Oh, no, of course not. That is where Smeagol helps. Nice Smeagol. Though no one tells him what it is all about, Smeagol helps again. He found. He knows it. What did he find? Asked Frodo. Gollum crouched down, and his voice sank to a whisper again. A little path leading up into the mountains, and then a stair, a narrow stair. Oh yes, very long and narrow, and then more stairs. And then his voice sank even lower. A tunnel, a dark tunnel, and at last a little cliff, and a path high above the main paths. It was that way that Smeagol got out of the darkness, but it was years ago. The path may have vanished now, but perhaps not, perhaps not. I don't like the sound of it at all, said Sam. Sounds too easy at any rate in the telling. If that path is still there, it'll be guarded too. Wasn't it guarded, Gollum? As he said this, he caught, or fancied he caught, a green gleam in Gollum's eye. Gollum muttered, but did not reply. Is it guarded? Asked Frodo sternly. And did you escape out of the darkness, Smeagol? Were you not rather permitted to depart upon an errand? That at least is what Aragorn thought, who found you by the dead marshes some years ago. It's a lie, hissed Gollum, and an evil light came into his eyes at the naming of Aragorn. He lied on me, yes he did. I did escape all by my poor self. Indeed, I was told to seek for the precious, and I have searched and searched, of course I have, but not for the black one. The precious was ours. It was mine, I tell you. I did escape. Frodo felt a strange certainty that in this matter Gollum was for once not so far from the truth as might be suspected, that he had somehow found a way out of Mordor, and at least believed that it was by his own cunning. For one thing, he noted that Gollum used I, and that seemed usually to be a sign, on its rare appearances, that some remnants of old truth and sincerity were for the moment on top. But even if Gollum could be trusted on this point, Frodo didn't forget the wiles of the enemy. The escape may have been allowed or arranged, and well known in the Dark Tower, and in any case Gollum was plainly keeping a good deal back. I ask you again, he said, is not this secret way guarded? But the name of Aragorn had put Gollum into a sullen mood. He had all the injured air of a liar suspected when for once he has told the truth or part of it. He didn't answer. Is it not guarded? Frodo repeated. Yes, yes, perhaps. No safe places in this country, said Gollum sulkily. No safe places, but Master must try it or go home. No other way. They couldn't get him to say more. The name of the perilous place and the high pass he could not tell or would not. Its name was Cirith Ungol, a name of dreadful rumour. Aragorn could perhaps have told them that name and its significance. Gandalf would have warned them. But they were alone, and Aragorn was far away, and Gandalf stood amid the ruin of Isengard and strove with Saruman, delayed by treason. Yet even as he spoke his last words to Saruman, and the Palantir crashed in fire upon the steeps of Orthanc, his mind was ever upon Frodo and Samwise. Over the long leagues his mind sought for them in hope and pity. Maybe Frodo felt it, not knowing it, as he had upon Armonhem, even though he believed that Gandalf was gone forever into the shadow in Moria, far away. He sat upon the ground for a long while, silent, his head bowed, striving to recall all that Gandalf had said to him. But for this choice he could recall no counsel. Indeed, Gandalf's guidance had been taken from them too soon, while the Dark Land was still very far away. How they should enter it at the last Gandalf had not said. Perhaps he could not say. Into the stronghold of the enemy in the north, into Dol Guldur, he had once ventured. But into Mordor, to the Mountain of Fire, and to Barad-dûr, since the Dark Lord rose in power again, had he ever journeyed there? Frodo didn't think so. And here he was, a little halfling from the Shire, a simple hobbit of the quiet countryside, expected to find a way where the great ones could not go, or dared not go. It was an evil fate. But he'd taken it on himself in his own sitting room in the far-off spring of another year, so remote now that it was like a chapter in a story of the world's youth, when the trees of silver and gold were still in bloom. This was an evil choice. Which way should he choose? And if both led to terror and death, what good lay in choice? The day drew on. A deep silence fell upon the little grey hollow where they lay, so near to the borders of the land of fear, a silence that could be felt, as if it were a thick veil that cut them off from all the world about them. Above them was a dome of pale sky, barred with fleeting smoke, but it seemed high and far away, as if seen through great deeps of air, heavy with brooding thought. Not even an eagle poised against the sun would have marked the hobbit sitting there, under the weight of doom, silent, not moving, shrouded in their thin grey cloaks. For a moment he might have paused to consider Gollum, a tiny figure sprawling on the ground. There perhaps lay the famished skeleton of some child of men, its ragged garments still clinging to it, its long arms and legs almost bone-white and bone-thin, no flesh worth a peck. Frodo's head was bowed over his knees, but Sam leaned back, with hands behind his head, staring out of his hood at the empty sky. At least for a long while it was empty. Then presently Sam thought he saw a dark, bird-like figure wheel into the circle of his sight, and hover, and then wheel away again. Two more followed, and then a fourth. They were very small to look at, yet he knew, somehow, that they were huge, with a vast stretch of pinion, flying at a great height. He covered his eyes and bent forward, cowering. The same warning fear was on him as he had felt in the presence of the Black Riders, the helpless horror that had come with a cry in the wind and the shadow on the moon, though now it was not so crushing or compelling. The menace was more remote, but menace it was. Frodo felt it too. His thought was broken. He stirred and shivered, but he didn't look up. Gollum huddled himself together like a cornered spider. The winged shapes wheeled and stooped swiftly down, speeding back to Mordor. Sam took a deep breath. The riders are bad again, up in the air, he said in a hoarse whisper. I saw them. Do you think they could see us? They were very high up, and if they're Black Riders, same as before, then they can't see much by daylight, can they? No, perhaps not, said Frodo, but their steeds could see, and these winged creatures that they ride on now, they can probably see more than any other creature. They are like great carrion birds. They are looking for something. The enemy is on the watch, I fear. The feeling of dread passed, but the enfolding silence was broken. For some time they'd been cut off from the world, as if in an invisible island. Now they were laid bare again. Peril had returned, but still Frodo did not speak to Gollum or make his choice. His eyes were closed, as if he were dreaming, or looking inward into his heart and memory. At last he stirred and stood up, and it seemed that he was about to speak and to the side. But, hark, he said. What's that? A new fear was upon them. They heard singing and hoarse shouting. At first, it seemed a long way off, but it drew nearer. It was coming towards them. It leapt into all their minds that the Black Wings had spied them and had sent armed soldiers to seize them. No speed seemed too great for these terrible servants of Sauron. They crouched, listening. The voices and the clink of weapons and harness were very close. Frodo and Sam loosened their small swords in their sheaths. Flight was impossible. Gollum rose slowly and crawled insect-like to the lip of the hollow. Very cautiously he raised himself inch by inch, until he could peer over it between two broken points of stone. He remained there without moving for some time, making no sound. Presently the voices began to recede again, and then they slowly faded away. Far off a horn blew on the ramparts of the Morannon. Then quietly Gollum drew back and slipped down into the hollow. "More men going to Mordor," he said in a low voice. "Dark faces. We've not seen men like these before. No, Smeagol hasn't. They're fierce. They have black eyes and long black hair and gold rings in their ears. Yes, lots of beautiful gold. And some have red paint on their cheeks and red cloaks, and their flags are red, and the tips of their spears, and they have round shields, yellow and black with big spikes. Not nice. Very cruel, wicked men they look. Almost as bad as orcs, and much bigger. Smeagol thinks they have come out of the south beyond the great river's end. They came up that road. They've passed on to the Black Gate, but more may follow. Always more people coming to Mordor. One day all the peoples will be inside." "Were there any Oliphants?" asked Sam, forgetting his fear in his eagerness for news of strange places. No Oliphants. What are Oliphants?" said Gollum. Sam stood up, putting his hands behind his back, as he always did when speaking poetry, and began. "Grey as a mouse, big as a house, nose like a snake, I make the earth shake. As I tramp through the grass, trees crack as I pass. With horns in my mouth, I walk in the south, flapping big ears. Beyond count of years, I stump round and round, never lie on the ground, not even to die. Oliphant am I, biggest of all, huge, old, and tall. If ever you'd met me, you wouldn't forget me. If you never do, you won't think I'm true. But old Oliphant am I, and I never lie." "That," said Sam, when he'd finished reciting, "that's a rhyme we have in the Shire. Nonsense, maybe, and maybe not. But we have our tales too, and news of the south, you know. In the old days,
Hey,
hobbits used to
V-Woo,
go
how
on
you
their travels
doing?
now and again.
Good to see you.
Not that many ever came back,
Hope you're
and not
doing
that all
well.
they said was believed. News from Bray, and not sure as Shire talk, as the sayings go. But I've heard tales of the big folk down away in the Sunlands. Sweartings we call them in our tales, and they ride on Oliphants, 'tis said, when they fight. They put houses and towers on the Oliphants' backs and all, and the Oliphants throw rocks and trees at one another. So when you say, men out of the south, all in red and gold, I said, were there any Oliphants? For if there was, I was going to take a look. Risk or no, but now I don't suppose I'll ever see an Oliphant. Maybe there ain't no such beast," he sighed. No Oliphants," said Gollum again. "Smeagol hasn't heard of them. He doesn't want to see them. He doesn't want them to be. Smeagol wants to go away from here and hide somewhere safer, Smeagol wants Master to go.
Nice.
Master.
Yeah, we
Won't you come
got
with
some rain
Smeagol?
the past couple of days,
Grover
so
stood up.
we're doing good too.
He'd laughed in the midst of
I'm
all
not
his
doing
cares
too
when
bad
Sam
besides
pointed out the old fireside
not be able
run
to
of
see
volleyball,
very good.
and the laugh had released him from hesitation. I wish we had 1,000
My glasses are
volleyball
broken,
with
so
Gandalf on a
I'm going
white one at their head, he said. Then we'd
a
break
little
away into this easy
blind
land,
right now.
but we've not. Just our own tired legs, that's all. Well, Smeagol, the third turn may turn the best. I will come with you. Good master, wise master, nice master, said Gollum in delight, patting Frodo's knees. Good master, dearest thou, nice hobbits. Under
Hey,
the shadows
Soy,
of
how you
stones,
doing?
close under the stones,
Good to see you.
lie quiet till the yellow face goes away. Then we can go quickly, soft and quick as shadows we must be. Chapter 4 of Herbs and Stewed Rabbit. For the few hours of daylight that were left, they rested, shifting into the shade as the sun moved, until at last the shadow of the western rim of their dell grew long, and darkness filled all the hollow. Then they ate a little and drank sparingly. Gollum ate nothing. But
Yeah, it
his cup of
has. It
water
has
bland.
been a minute.
Soon get more now, he said, licking his lips. Good water runs down in streams to the great river. Nice water in the lands we're going
How
to.
you been doing, Soy?
Smeagol will get food there too, perhaps. He's very hungry. Yes. He set his two large flat hands on his shrunken belly, and a pale green light came into his eyes. The dusk was deep when at length they set out, creeping over the westward rim of the dell, and fading like ghosts into the broken country on the borders of the road. The moon was now 3 nights from the full,
Yeah, the
but
prescription ones that
until nearly midnight.
I actually need to be able to see. I can't really see very good without them.
Burned high up in the towers of the teeth, but otherwise no sign could be seen or heard of the sleepless watch on the moorland.
Let's do a dab.
For many miles the red eye seemed to stare at them as they fled, stumbling through a barren, stony country.
I have I skipped my glasses, but
they kept it on their left,
it's
following its line
like
as well as
3-4 years old, and your
last,
script for your glasses only good for a year,
and they were already weary,
so I have to go through the whole
one short rest,
process again of
to a small fiery point
seeing an eye doctor.
They turned to the dark northern shoulder of the lower mountains and were heading south.
Getting glasses, which
with hearts,
it kind of sucks because I can't afford that right now, or
they were not going
ever.
quick enough for Gollum. By his reckoning, it was nearly 30 leagues from the Morannon to the crossroads of Osgiliath, and he hoped to cover that distance in 4 journeys. So soon, they struggled on once more.
Because it's hard to save up the money and get the money together for it when you're on a fixed income. So it kind of sucks sometimes, but you learn to live with it.
Light revealed to them a land already less barren and ruinous. The mountains still loomed up ominously on their left, but near at hand they could see the southward road, now bearing away from the black roots of the hills and slanting westward. Beyond it were slopes covered with somber trees like dark clouds, but all about them lay a tumbled heathland, grown with ling and broom and cornel, and other shrubs that they didn't know. Here and there they saw knots of tall pine trees. The hearts of the hobbits rose again a little in spite of weariness. The air was fresh and fragrant, and it the uplands of the Northfarthing far away. It seemed good to be reprieved in a land that had only been for a few years under the dominion of the Dark Lord and wasn't yet fallen wholly into decay. But they didn't forget their danger, nor the black gate that was still all too near, hidden though it was behind the gloomy heights.
Because as long as I could get
place where they could shelter from evil eyes while the light lasted.
the eye doctor and eye appointment, that part,
uneasily.
I guess that'd be the most
They lay
expensive
deep
part
in
out of the
weather
way.
and counted out the slow
There's a
hours
website I
in which
went
there
to
seemed
that
little change.
I
For
got
they
my
were still under the shadows of the
glasses from
Etheldorf,
last time that
and the sun was veiled.
I could get them for pretty cheap
Frodo
with what
slept at
the
times,
special
deeply
things
and
I have
peacefully,
done to them,
either
because
trusting Gollum or
how
too
bad my
tired
vision
and
is, I
troubled
usually
by
have them cut down
But
some so
Sam
they're not
found
that
it
heavy, and
difficult to do more than
they
go,
usually have a deal that
even
where
when Gollum was
I
playing
get one
fast
pair of
asleep,
glasses, I get a whole
whispering
nother
and
set for
tittering
free,
with
so
secret
I end up with 2
dreams.
sets of glasses for a
Hunger,
backup.
perhaps, more than mistrust kept him wakeful. He had begun to long for a good homely meal, something hot
Or
out of the
just
pot.
find a cheap place to
As
get them
soon as
around.
the land faded into a formless grey of the coming night,
Excuse me, where I
they
live, since I live
started
in a
out
small
again.
town,
In a little while, Gollum
options
led
are
them down onto the
limited, and
southward road, and after that they
it
went
being
on more
a
quickly, though the
oil
danger
filled
was greater.
town,
Their
everything's
ears were strained for the sound of hoof
almost
or foot
twice
on the
as
road ahead,
twice as
or following them from
expensive.
behind.
It's
But the
like
night passed,
paying big
and they
city
heard no
prices
sound
for
of walker
living
or
in a
rider.
small ass town.
The
It's
road had
ridiculous.
been made in a long lost time, and for perhaps 30 miles below the Morannon, it had been newly repaired. But as it went south, the wild encroached upon it. The handiwork of men of old could still be seen in its straight, sure flight and level course. Now and again it cut its way through hillside slopes, or leapt over a stream upon a wide, shapely arch of enduring masonry. But at last all signs of stonework faded, save for a broken pillar here and there, peering out of bushes at the side, or old paving stones still lurking amid weeds and moss. Heather and trees and bracken scrambled down and overhung the banks, or sprawled out over the surface. It dwindled at last to a country cart road little used. But it didn't wind. It held on its own sure course and guided them by the swiftest way. So they passed into the northern marches of that land that men once called Ithilien, a fair country of climbing woods and swift-falling streams. The night became fine under star and round moon, and it seemed to the hobbits that the fragrance of the air grew as they went forward, and from the blowing and muttering of Gollum, it seemed that he noticed it too, and didn't relish it. At the first signs of day, they halted again. They'd come to the end of a long cutting, deep and sheer-sided in the middle, by which the road clove its way through a stony ridge. Now they climbed up the westward bank and looked abroad. Day was opening in the sky, and they saw that the mountains were now much further off, receding eastward in a long curve that was lost in the distance. Before them, as they turned west, gentle slopes ran down into dim hazes far below.
Hey,
All
Christopher.
about them were small woods of resinous trees, fir and cedar
No, damn.
and cypress, and other kinds unknown in the Shire,
Yeah, that's
with
about
wide glades among them, and
that's
everywhere
about
there
here
was a
too.
wealth of
It's
sweet
staring
smelling
up,
herbs and shrubs.
if
The
not
long journey
more.
from Rivendell had brought them far south of their own land, but not until now, in this more sheltered region, had the hobbits felt the change of clime. Here spring was already busy about them. Fronds pierced moss and mold, larches were green-fingered, small flowers were opening in the turf, birds were singing. Ithilien, the garden of Gondor, now desolate, kept still a dishevelled, dryad loveliness. South and west it looked towards the warm lower vales of Anduin, shielded from the east by the Etheldorf, and yet not under the mountain shadow, protected from the north by the Emyn Muil, open to the southern airs and the moist winds from the sea far away. Many great trees grew there, planted long ago, falling into untended age amid a riot of careless descendants. And groves and thickets there were, of tamarisk and pungent terebinth, of olive and of bay, and there were junipers and myrtles, and thymes that grew in bushes, or with their woody creeping stems mantled in deep tapestries the hidden stones. Sages of many kinds putting forth blue flowers, or red, or pale green, and marjorams and new sprouting parsleys, and many herbs of forms and scents beyond the garden lore of Sam. The grots and rocky walls were already starred with saxifrages and stone crops. Primaroles and anemones were awake in the filbert brakes, and asphodel and many lily flowers nodded their half-opened heads in the grass. Deep green grass beside the pools, where falling streams halted in cool hollows on their journey down to Andwy. The travellers turned their backs on the road and went downhill. As they walked, brushing their way through bush and herb, sweet odours rose about them. Gollum coughed and retched, but the hobbits breathed deep, and suddenly Sam laughed, for heart's ease, not for jest. They followed a stream that went quickly down before them. Presently it brought them to a small, clear lake in a shallow dell. It lay in the broken ruins of an ancient stone basin, the carven rim of which was almost wholly covered with mosses and rose brambles. Iris swords stood in ranks about it, and water lily leaves floated on its dark, gently rippling surface. But it was deep and fresh, and spilled ever softly out over a stony lip at the far end. Here they washed themselves and drank their fill at the infalling freshet. Then they sought for a resting place and a hiding place, for this land, fair seeming still, was none the less now territory of the enemy. They'd not come very far from the road, and yet even in so short a space they'd seen scars of the old wars, and the newer wounds made by the orcs and other foul servants of the Dark Lord. A pit of uncovered filth and refuse, trees hewn down wantonly and left to die, with evil runes or the fell sign of the eye cut in rude strokes on their bark. Sam scrambling below the outfall of the lake, smelling and touching the unfamiliar plants and trees, forgetful for the moment of Mordor, was reminded suddenly of their ever-present peril. He stumbled on a ring still scorched by fire, and in the midst of it he found a pile of charred and broken bones and skulls. The swift growth of the wild with briar and eglantine and trailing clematis was already drawing a veil over this place of dreadful feast and slaughter. But it wasn't ancient. He hurried back to his companions, but he said nothing. The bones were best left in peace and not pawed and routed by Gollum. "Let's find a place to lie up in," he said. "Not lower down, higher up for me." A little way back above the lake, they found a deep brown bed of last year's fern. Beyond it was a thicket of dark-leaved bay trees, climbing up a steep bank that was crowned with old cedars. Here they decided to rest and pass the day, which already promised to be bright and warm. A good day for strolling on their way along the groves and glades of Ithilien. But though orcs may shun the sunlight, there were too many places here where they could lie hid and watch, and other evil eyes were abroad. Sauron had many servants. Gollum, in any case, wouldn't move under the yellow face. Soon it would look over the dark ridges of the Efelduath, and he would faint and cower in the light and heat. Sam had been giving earnest thought to food as they marched. Now that the despair of the impassable gate was behind him, he didn't feel so inclined as his master to take no thought for their livelihood beyond the end of their errand. And anyway, it seemed wiser to him to save the waybread of the elves for worse times ahead. 6 days or more had passed since he reckoned that they had only a bare supply for 3 weeks. "If we reach the fire in that time, we'll be lucky at this rate," he thought. "And we might be wanting to get back. We might." Besides, at the end of a long night march, and after bathing and drinking, he felt even more hungry than usual. A supper or a breakfast by the fire in the old kitchen at Bagshot Row was what he really wanted. An idea struck him, and he turned to Gollum.
All right, everyone, I'm gonna call into this live for tonight. I want to thank everyone for stopping by and everyone who continues to stop by. I definitely appreciate all y'all's support. Until next time, everyone, y'all stay safe out there.